When we think about the US and financial regulation, we tend to think about the really big banks, such as Citi and Morgan and so on. But we should remember that the US has thousands of smaller community and regional banks. And, to some extent, these have always been regulated a bit differently from the large banks. And what I would expect to happen is that the difference between the way large banks and small banks are regulated will become even more accentuated. In this context, I'd like to mention that there's a House Committee on Financial Services, which is under the chairmanship of someone called Jeb Hensarling, and it's proposed something called the Financial Choice Act. And Financial Choice Act is kind of an interesting idea. Basically, what it says is that if you give banks a choice between, if you keep a leverage ratio of 10%, you don't need to worry about any of the other regulations. That's essentially what it says. So now, so that that's something that's potentially quite attractive, I think, to smallish banks in the U.S. What's more, Hensarling is a Trump supporter, and he's also very close to Mike Pence. So I think his ideas are, going to carry some weight around the place. So it's quite possible that will come to pass. Right now, we do have a leverage ratio as part of the regulatory environment, but it's just one component of the regulatory environment, and it's 5 to 6% in the U.S. right now. But many of the small banks in the U.S. actually already have a leverage ratio of 10%. So, the idea of saying, well, we've got a leverage ratio of 10%, we don't have to worry about any of the other regulations, could be quite attractive to them. What other changes might we expect? Tiff mentioned, Dodd-Frank and the Volcker Rule. I think the Volcker Rule could well go. I think the Trump administration is going to be under a lot of pressure to roll back the Volcker Rule, and it could be, if the Volcker Rule goes, then the corresponding rules in the UK and Europe will also be rolled back. I agree with the earlier speakers that I don't think Dodd-Frank is going to be totally dismantled, which is, of course, what Trump said he wanted to do on Monday. And indeed, most of the senior bankers in the U.S. don't think Dodd-Frank should be totally dismantled. They think it should be, aspects of it should be rolled back, but they don't want to throw it out the window altogether. What else might happen? One regulation that's on the horizon, one of the interesting things will be how Trump administration interfaces with Basel. And one of Basel rules that is fairly unpopular, I think, that is on the horizon is something called FRTB, Fundamental Review of the Trading Book, which is new rules, very complex rules, for calculating market risk capital. It is conceivable that, Trump said this rule will not apply to U.S. banks, which would, of course, put the Trump administration in conflict with the Basel Committee, but it could also, the rule is very unpopular in other parts of the world as well. So it could be that will lead to the rule not being implemented at all.